What's going on, Guardians? It's Tizzle here, and today I'm excited to showcase this super slept on Solar Hunter build to you. I've been preaching since before Solar 3.0 that ophidia spathe is a top tier Solar Hunter exotic, and yet I never see it get any love. No YouTube videos about it, no people running it in any content I run with different people, but it is extremely good, believe me. It's been my go-to Hunter exotic ever since Solar 3.0 came out. Shards of Galanor are a shell of their former self, Athrus's Embrace is a little too niche for PvE in my opinion, Caliban's Hand is fun in lower end content, but not great in high end content, and the former king, which was young Ahamkar's Spine, just got hit with a nerf that really hurts his viability in endgame PvE. On top of that, I just never enjoyed running this exotic in PvE because I just don't like trip mines in PvE. It is a preference thing, but yeah, that playstyle is just not for me. All that is to say, I've been maining ophidia spathe for 2 years now, and the whole time since Solar 3.0 has come out. This build is honestly amazing, and this season, thanks to the artifact mods, it is shining brighter than ever. So strap in, and I will walk you through all the ins and outs of this incredible build, because there are some neat nuances that you may not know about, and I will break it all down. So of course, let's start with the exotic, ophidia spathe. It has the exotic perk Scissor Fingers, grants 2 knives per charge. The simplest and easiest to understand exotic perk there has ever been. So no matter what knife you run, you will always get 2 knife charges for your melee. This is super cool because if we run out of both melee charges, we can do a gambler's dodge to get not 1 but 2 knife charges back. And this is very significant because with this build, our knives are extremely powerful and do a lot of work. We run the knife trick knives because they apply Scorch, where the other 3 knife abilities do not. As such, we will be running an ignition based build, but trust me, this build does far more than just ignite enemies. But before we get into the fragments, let's look at the aspects which really synergize with this build. The most important aspect is Knock 'em Down. This enhances our solar supers, and we are running Blade Barrage with this build, which gives us more knives in our super, which means more damage. The Destiny Data Compendium says it gives us 3 more knives per fan, taking our total from 14 to 20. On top of this, when we are Radiant, final blows with our throwing knives refund our melee energy. So this means if we are killing trash tier enemies with our melees, we will constantly get the melee back. That is because we run Ember of Torches to make us Radiant when we deal damage with our melee. So it is a really fun gameplay loop where we throw a knife to activate Radiant, which is a 25% weapon damage boost all on its own, and then we also get our knife back every time we get a kill with our throwing knife. They synergize perfectly together. The next aspect I run is On Your Mark, which grants us and allies increased handling and reload speed for precision final blows. And when we dodge, it immediately gives us full stacks of On Your Mark. This is a super nice buff to the feel of our weapons, but the main reason I run it is because it gives us 3 fragment slots. But if you want to sacrifice a fragment slot, then feel free to run Gunpowder Gamble, which can give you even more solar ignitions. This makes the build even stronger from an offensive standpoint, but my preference is On Your Mark due to the 1 extra fragment. Not to mention, I love when my weapons feel buttery smooth from high handling, and I absolutely hate reloading, so that reload improvement is very nice and very noticeable. So now let's talk about fragments. We already mentioned Ember of Torches, which is an absolute must because you need to be Radiant to always be getting your knife charge back. We then want Ember of Empyrean, where solar weapon or ability final blows extend the duration of Restoration and Radiant. With how many knives you can throw with this build, you will pretty much always be able to proc Radiant. But in higher tier content, this is great because you can just chuck out a knife to activate Radiant, and then mow down adds from a distance with a solar weapon to keep Radiant procced. Additionally, it extends Restoration, so we want to run healing grenades with this build so that we can have pretty much permanent resto. This makes this build extremely strong in solo play. You can just throw down a healing grenade to proc resto, and then start slaying with your knives and solar weapons to keep the Radiant and Restoration going forever thanks to Ember of Empyrean. So that is a basic gameplay loop. But it gets much stronger with our next 3 aspects because here we build into ignitions. We run Ember of Ashes to apply more Scorch to targets. This takes our knives from 20 Scorch to 30 Scorch per knife, and we throw 3 knives with every melee. So full knife melee hit will hit for 90 Scorch, and we need 100 to cause an ignition. So sadly, we still have to hit a target with 2 melees. However, I still run this fragment because it gives us forgiveness. If we only land 2 knives per throw, that is still 120 Scorch, where without it, you will only apply 80 Scorch. The knives fan out if you throw them from a distance, so sometimes it can be tough to land them all on a target. And in higher end content, you don't want to get too close, so yeah, run this for the forgiveness. Trust me. Additionally, the more stacks of Scorch you apply, the more damage the Scorch does. I have a video coming out this weekend that breaks down everything you need to know about Scorch and Ignitions, so be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss that video. There's a ton of info in there, and I learned a lot making it. Next, we have Ember of Eruption, where your solar ignitions have increased area of effect. Obviously, if we are building into ignitions, we want them to hit the most targets possible, so I like to run this fragment. And lastly, and this one is quite optional, but we have Ember of Searing. Defeating scorched targets grants melee energy and creates a fire sprite. Obviously, with Radiant giving us our knife back, this is not totally required, but in high-end content where enemies are harder to kill, this can be nice. Say you throw melee and it doesn't kill, but you kill it when it was scorched, then you will get some melee energy back faster. Additionally, it creates a fire sprite which gives you 12.5% grenade energy back. So this fragment is all about forgiveness. It just helps our cooldowns if for some reason we don't have our abilities up. But Gambler's Dodge gets you both melees back as I mentioned, so you can usually just dodge near an enemy to get your melee charges. And the healing grenade is usually not needed because ideally you'll be slaying out and extending restoration with Ember of Empyrean. But again, this comes in handy in higher tier content. But in lower tier content, I would say ditch this fragment and throw on Gunpowder Gamble instead for even more destruction. Again, I like to give options. Play the way that you want to play. I'm just giving the framework. And trust me, this build is extremely strong in all activities. I routinely run it in Crota's End and it does very well. So now that brings us to the mods. On the helmet, we obviously have Hands On for more super energy on melee kills, and then Solar Siphon for creating orbs when we get a kill with a solar weapon. On the gloves, we have Focusing Strike for more class ability when we deal damage with a melee, and Impact Induction for more grenade energy when we deal damage with our melee. This build is obviously always dealing melee damage, so this just further decreases our cooldowns on our dodge and grenade. And lastly, Heavy Handed to make orbs on melee kills. On the chest, just run the usual resist mods which are activity dependent. On your boots, it's your choice. I like one recuperation mod to get health back on orb pickup. This just makes us even more unkillable with restoration always going. But solar surge mods are also really nice here to help you deal even more damage. 3 solar surges are 22% more damage, and this stacks with the 25% increase in damage from Radiant. And then on the class item you can go with whatever you like as well. Time Dilation is nice for longer solar surge, and I run Double Bomber just in case I need a healing grenade in a pinch, then I can dodge for some extra grenade energy. Again, the framework for this build in particular is solo content survivability, but you can tweak it to be more offensive based. For build stats, I like to be very even across the board. Obviously 100 resilience before anything else for that 30% damage resistance, and then I run pretty even splits of everything else for a nice balance. But like I said, if the build is functioning as designed, then you don't need strength because you will get a ton of knives, you don't need discipline because one healing grenade is all you should need and then you can extend resto with Ember of Empyrean. Dodge shouldn't be required because we get our knives back from Knock 'em Down and Ember of Torches making us Radiant to give us our knives back on kill. So yeah, spec into 100 resilience and then whatever else you want. Finally, that brings us to weapons. Solar weapons have some great heavy exotics with the Lament, Galahorn, etc. I actually like to run Parasite as this build has a lot of ad clear and then you can launch a worm to take out high health targets. So yeah, go with whatever here. Skyburner's Oath is also a menace for applying Scorch, and we have Unstoppable Scout Rifle this season, so this is a great pairing. But the weapon I am loving is Igneous Hammer with Golden Tricorn. Hand Cannons got a buff this season and feel great in PvE, and then we are always getting ability kills with our knives, so this hand cannon hits harder than an exotic primary hand cannon. It is crazy how good this feels. And we also have Overload hand cannon on the artifact this season. My crit damage can go from 13,935 damage at base to 28,740 damage. That is more than double the damage, and it can even go slightly higher than that if I were to be running 3 Solar Surge mods. That is because we have a few different buffs going on. We have Golden Tricorn times 2, which is a 50% buff. We proc this by getting a weapon kill and then an ability kill, which in this case is obviously our melee. Additionally, the melee kill gives us 25% from Radiant, and it procs Monochromatic Maestro, which is 10% more damage, and then we can also get Solar Weapon Surges when we pick up an orb. For comparison, Sturm with Radiant proc hits for 22,296 damage. So yeah, Golden Tricorn slaps on this build. But as always, run whatever solar weapons you want. These are just some options that I like to go with. And finally, that brings us to the artifact mods. I just spoke about monochromatic maestro, but let's talk about it some more. This buffs our abilities and our weapon damage by 10%, and it is absolutely perfect for this build. You can melee an enemy to proc it, and then your weapon hits for 10% more damage on top of any other buffs, and yes, this stacks with everything from Surges to Radiant and even Blessing of the Sky from Lumina. It's just a free 10% damage. And then, this buffs your throwing knives as well, so it's just a perfect loop. I've been wanting to make this build for a few seasons now, and I'm so happy I got to make it this season with monochromatic maestro on the artifact. Again, it is great on Crota and Ear Ute. You just throw out a melee and then go to town. The damage buff on your weapons also lasts longer than 5 seconds because the Scorch Ticks actually extend monochromatic maestro. So you can throw a melee, do damage till it runs out, and then throw another melee and do more damage. Then dodge to get 2 knives back, and then just keep doing this. Obviously, Foe Tracer and Star Eater Scales are also very good damage options for hunters, and in the future these will definitely be better. But for this season in particular, Ophidia Spathe is great thanks to the huge uptime you can get from monochromatic maestro. My damage is always awesome on our team when I run this build. Aside from that, Solar Orbs is good obviously, Elemental Fury to deal more damage to stun champions with your melee abilities. This includes ignition damage, so when a champ is stunned, you can throw 2 melees which will cause an ignition and deal 35% more damage. And then just whatever other mods you like. The rest are up to you. And speaking of ignitions, this is really cool. If you throw 2 melees at a target and ignite it but it doesn't die, you will lose your melee charges. But if it does die, even if it's the ignition damage, you will get your melees back. On top of this, if the ignition kills an enemy in close proximity, you will also get the melees back. This is why you want Ember of Eruption for that increased area of effect. It's a neat little interaction that I wanted to point out. Again, I've been running this build for over a year and a half now, and there are many intricacies to this build that you'll pick up on over time. So give it a shot, because in my opinion, Ophidia Spathe is the most slept on solar hunter exotic in the game. It is great in basically all content, especially when Solar Surge is on, but it never gets any love. And with monochromatic maestro on the artifact this season, there has never been a better time to run it. Honestly, give it a try. I will have a dim link in the description if you want to copy my build, but like I said, there are more than a few different ways to run this build. So I hope you enjoy it. And if you enjoyed the video and want to see more helpful Destiny 2 content in the future, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss future uploads. The video this weekend on Scorch stacking will actually give a lot of helpful information that will benefit you for this build in particular. Anyways, that is it for the video. If you made it this far, then I thank you so much for watching to the end. Happy knife throwing and take care.